They would never know the joy of having a child. In the quiet village of Nobi, there lived a beautiful and intelligent girl named Uju. She was the only child of her parents, and everyone admired her for her gentleness. Like the morning breeze, she had a calm and kind nature. Uju was not only known for her beauty but also for her brilliance in school. Every year, she brought home awards for being the best student, and the village celebrated her success as though it were their own. Her parents, Ebra and Chibuzo, were very proud of her. They always encouraged her, saying, "You will achieve great things, Uju. Just keep working hard." Uju had big dreams, and she often told her parents, "Mama, Papa, I want to be a banker when I grow up. I'll live in the city, wear beautiful clothes, and work in a tall building." Her parents would smile, believing their daughter would become everything she dreamed of. But life is not always kind, and Uju's once bright future was about to take a dark turn. Uju's life changed the moment a group of youth corps members arrived in Nobi for their national service. Among them were Jude, Connor, and Dozie. At first, they were friendly and often helped with school activities, becoming close to Uju. She enjoyed their company, especially since they shared stories of life in the city, where she hoped to be one day. However, what began as a friendly relationship soon took a dark and horrifying turn. One day, as Uju was helping Jude with an assignment, he, along with Connor and Dozie, forced themselves on her. Uju, confused and terrified, could not understand why the people she had trusted would do such a thing. What these men didn't realize was that Uju was no ordinary girl, and the consequences of their actions were soon to follow. Even after the horrible incident, Uju held on to her dream. She would often sit outside her house, staring at the sky and whispering to herself, "I will still be a banker one day. I have to make it to the city." Her parents, unaware of the trauma their daughter had gone through, continued to encourage her. But one fateful afternoon, everything changed again. Uju's parents had gone to a neighboring village, Izayago, for a short visit. On their way back, they were involved in a fatal accident. The news of their passing spread quickly through the village, leaving Uju devastated. Her world collapsed. The one thing she held on to, her parents' love, was gone. The village mourned with her, but no amount of condolences could ease the pain she felt. The loss of her parents left Uju in a deep state of despair. The once bright and promising student could barely concentrate in school. Her grades plummeted, and the girl who used to be the pride of Nobi became distant and withdrawn. Her teachers, knowing what she had gone through, did not pressure her. But Uju's heart was heavy with sorrow. She would often sit quietly in class, staring at her books but seeing nothing. Sometimes, she would sit alone, crying softly, wishing her parents were still alive to guide her. Despite her pain, Uju had to continue with school. In Nobi, education was highly valued, and dropping out would bring shame to her family, even though they were no longer there. Her dream of becoming a banker now seemed impossible. She would often think, "How can I go to the city without my parents? What's the point of it all?" Still, she kept attending school, even though it felt meaningless. Little did she know that her life was about to take another unexpected turn when new youth corps members, including Jude and his friends, were assigned to teach at her school. When the new corps members arrived, the entire school was excited. The old, strict teachers had been replaced by young and energetic people who brought a fresh wave of excitement to the students. Jude was assigned to Uju's class, and while the other students eagerly participated, Uju remained silent and distant. Jude noticed her silence and how she always kept to herself. One day, he called on her to answer a question in class. Uju froze, her mind going blank, and the other students laughed at her silence. Embarrassed, she ran out of the classroom in tears. Jude felt guilty for embarrassing her in front of the class. After the lesson, he called Uju aside and asked her gently, "What's wrong, Uju? You were once so bright. What happened? With tears in her eyes, Uju shared the story of her parents' accident and the struggles she had faced since then. Jude was moved by her story and offered to help her with her studies. Little did Uju know that this offer of kindness would soon lead her back into the darkness she thought she had escaped. Uju began visiting Jude's house for extra lessons. At first, the lessons helped, and she started improving in school. Slowly, her confidence returned, and the sadness in her heart began to lift. Jude was patient and supportive, often buying her small gifts and encouraging her to stay focused on her dreams. However, the other core members, Connor and Dozie, noticed how often Uju visited Jude's house. They began making inappropriate comments, wondering why Jude kept her all to himself. One evening, Connor and Dozie confronted Jude outside his house. "Why do you keep Uju all to yourself? She's beautiful, and we want a taste too," Connor said with a wicked grin. Jude, shocked and angry, refused their suggestion and warned them to stay away from her. But Connor and Dozie wouldn't let go of their dark desires. They began plotting to take advantage of Uju, just as they had before, and this time, they planned to do it without Jude's knowledge. One afternoon, when Uju went to Jude's house for her usual lesson, she found only Connor and Dozie there. Jude had been called away for an emergency. Trusting them as Jude's friends, Uju stepped inside. But as soon as the door closed, the two men overpowered her. They violated her again, leaving her broken and humiliated. Uju was left alone, trembling with pain, unable to move or call for help. The betrayal she felt was unimaginable. After the horrific attack, Uju's world seemed to crumble beyond repair. She was left alone, her body bruised, her spirit shattered. She didn't know what to do or where to go. The once bright, ambitious girl was now a shadow of herself. She hadn't only lost her parents, she had lost her dignity and trust in people. Jude returned later that day, unaware of what had happened in his absence. When he saw the state Uju was in, his heart sank. She could barely look at him, and he knew something terrible had happened. But before he could ask, Uju ran out of his house, disappearing into the night. The days that followed were filled with unbearable pain for Uju. She could hardly eat or sleep, and the villagers began to notice her absence from school. What made things worse was the rumor that began spreading across Nobi. Some girls who had always been jealous of Uju's closeness to the youth corps members started whispering that she was having inappropriate relationships with them. "She's always going to their house," one girl said. "Everyone knows she's been with all of them." Soon, the entire village was buzzing with gossip. People pointed fingers at Uju as she walked by, shaking their heads in disappointment. The lies were more than she could bear, and soon, Uju made a painful decision: she had to leave the village. One morning, Uju packed her few belongings and left Nobi without telling anyone. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stay in the village any longer. The shame, the pain, and the constant whispers were too much for her to handle. She walked down the dusty road that led away from Nobi, unsure of what her future held. Meanwhile, Connor, Dozie, and Jude completed their service and returned to the city, each pretending like nothing had happened. They found jobs, made new friends, and began living their lives, unaware of the storm that was brewing around them. Strange and terrifying events soon began to unfold in the lives of Connor, Dozie, and Jude. Connor was the first to experience the misfortune. After landing a good job in Enugu, he was unexpectedly fired with no explanation. "I don't understand," he muttered to himself. "Why me?" Next was Dozie. He had been perfectly healthy, but one morning, he woke up with a mysterious illness that no doctor could explain. His body weakened with each passing day, and no treatment seemed to work. And then came Jude's turn. One day, without warning, his entire family, his parents and siblings, died in a tragic accident. The loss devastated him, and his life spiraled into chaos. As the three men faced their own tragedies, they couldn't understand why all these terrible things were happening to them. "We haven't done anything wrong," Connor insisted. But no matter how hard they tried to move forward, the misfortunes kept piling up. Desperate for answers, they decided to visit Isnoyakoi, a powerful seer known for his wisdom and connection to the spirit world. When they arrived at his hut in Saka, they explained their problems, hoping he could provide some insight. Isnoyakoi listened silently before shaking his head. "You have wronged someone," he said in a low voice. "And now the spirits are angry." Connor, Dozie, and Jude were confused. "Who did we wrong?" Jude asked, genuinely clueless. Isnoyakoi looked at them with piercing eyes. "Think back," he said. "There is a girl, Uju. You hurt her, and now the spirits of her parents are seeking justice." The men's faces paled as they remembered Uju. They had tried to forget about her, but now her memory came flooding back, along with the terrible thing they had done. Isnoyakoi continued, "The spirits will not rest until Uju forgives you. If she does not, your suffering will only get worse." The men knew they had no choice, they had to find Uju. After leaving the seer's hut, Connor, Dozie, and Jude felt the weight of their guilt like never before. They returned to Nobi, hoping to find Uju and beg for her forgiveness. But when they arrived, they were met with disappointment. "She's not here," one of the villagers said. "She left the village after the rumors spread." They asked around, hoping someone might know where she had gone, but all they heard was the same story: Uju had disappeared without a trace. The men were about to give up hope when an old woman who lived near Jude's former house spoke up. "If you're looking for Uju, you won't find her here," she said. But there was one person who was always close to her, Copper Jude. He cared for her. If anyone knows where she went, it's him. Connor and Dozie turned to Jude, their eyes filled with desperation. Jude's heart sank. He had always known that Uju had suffered after the incident, but hearing her name brought back all the guilt he had been trying to avoid. "There's only one way to find her," Jude said quietly. The three men traveled to Oka, where Jude had settled after his service. They knocked on doors, followed leads, and asked everyone they could about Uju's whereabouts. Finally, they arrived at Jude's house, where they found him sitting outside, deep in thought. "Copper Jude," Connor began, his voice trembling. "We've done something terrible. We need your help to find Uju and beg for her forgiveness." Jude's face darkened. He had always suspected something had gone wrong with Uju, but hearing it from them filled him with rage and sadness. "You hurt her," Jude said, his voice heavy. "And now, you want forgiveness." Inside Jude's home, the men were shocked to find Uju sitting quietly in the corner, heavily pregnant. She looked up at them, her eyes filled with both pain and strength. The three men fell to their knees, begging for her forgiveness. "We didn't know what we were doing," Connor sobbed. "We've been cursed ever since, and only you can lift it." Uju remained silent, her eyes fixed on the floor. The pain she had carried for so long was visible in every movement she made. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but cold. "You think you deserve forgiveness after what you did?" The room was silent as her words cut through the air. Jude, who had stood beside Uju all this time, gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Uju," he said softly, "forgiveness may not take away what happened, but it will free you from the burden you've been carrying." Uju thought long and hard. The men had taken so much from her, her trust, her peace, and her future. But now she had something more precious to hold on to, a child. And she knew that carrying the weight of her past would only harm her and her baby. Finally, Uju spoke, her voice calm but firm. "I will forgive you," she said, locking eyes with the men. "But there is a price." Connor, Dozie, and Jude looked up, hope flickering in their tear-filled eyes. Anything, Dozie whispered. We'll do anything. Uju's expression remained cold. I forgive you, but none of you will ever have children. That is the price you must pay for what you took from me. The men nodded, their hearts heavy with guilt and shame. They knew they had no choice but to accept her condition. They had ruined her life, and now they would live with the consequences. In the months that followed, Uju gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, with Jude by her side. He had always cared for her, and now he stood as her protector and companion. Together, they built a life of love, hope, and healing, leaving behind the pain of the past. Uju returned to school, determined to fulfill her dream of becoming a banker. With Jude's support, she worked hard, and despite everything she had been through, she succeeded. She became the banker she had always dreamed of being and found happiness once more. As for Connor, Dozie, and Jude, they lived the rest of their lives with the knowledge that their actions had cost them dearly. Though Uju had forgiven them, they would never know the joy of having children, and it was a burden they carried forever, a reminder of the price of their wickedness. I hope you enjoyed the tale. If so, please like the video, comment, share it with your family and friends, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for more enchanting tales like this one. Goodbye.